Good morning, everyone. This is Chris Korupati from Cambrian Lab. With me are my colleagues Manish Mathur and Hiren Shah. Today's session is on building a better supply chain. The agenda includes 3 items mostly. We'll do a very brief introduction of the team and our company. We'll also cover some of our observations working with various companies in different industries about some of the best practices for building a better supply chain. We've also developed a demonstration that we can use to showcase some of the techniques that have been fairly effective in the process of building a better supply chain. We are going to leave the last 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. However, it is very likely that you will have questions as the session is going on. So to support your thoughts while the session is going on, you can type in the question that you have in the Q&A tab of your Zoom webinar, Zoom client. So at the bottom, you have several tabs. The middle, the 5th one is Q&A. That would be the best place to type in if you have any questions. If you have any comment, of course, you can chat in. We will be monitoring both those tabs to see if there is any particular question or topic that need to be addressed. We'll keep all the Q&A answering part towards the end from a continuity perspective. Okay. With that, a little bit about Cambrian Lab. We are headquartered in San Francisco area, but we do have teams in other parts of the country. We primarily work with organizations in the industries that you see here, primarily automotive, high tech, semiconductors, medical devices, etc., where they tend to have both issues, scenarios related to new product introductions, supplier development, supply chain development, as well as quality management. Those are 3 areas that we focus on from a supply chain excellence perspective. Many of us came from the operation side of different industries, as well as from a technology industry. 3 of us, here today to share our experiences. All of us have 20+ experience, both in operations and technology, supporting NPI, supply chain development, and manufacturing. Okay, so one of the things that, when we started working with many of our customers on supply chain, there is a goal that everybody is arrived at, especially over the last 2 years, is that, hey, instead we need to really start looking at building a better supply chain. So if you think about it today, the last 2 years has seen a sea change in terms of thinking about supply chains, right? We've always had a fairly global supply chains, many of the organizations that we work with. However, it may or may not be serving some of the challenges well. So as a result, there is a thinking now that how do we really focus on building a better supply chain, not just focusing on process transformation, that comes in the shape of procure to pay and strategic sourcing. We believe that building a better supply chain has a fairly strategic value, especially at this time. And it does require a significant amount of engagement and building trust with your suppliers. However, since you are spending so much time and money with suppliers, it has to have better value, right? It has to pay for itself or in some ways show improvements. And many of our customers, as well as industry, if you look at what they've been able to achieve with supply chain development focus, is improved performance along these 4 facets, which is ability to reduce total cost, delivery schedules, on-time deliveries, quality requirements, and supplier-driven product and service innovation. And that's also a key part of if you're looking at your supply chain as a source of innovation. Okay, so it pays for itself to a large extent, although it is more work and more engagement with your suppliers than normal. What we have found is that it is a challenge for most organizations, primarily because one of the things that has been obvious is, while many organizations have fairly robust supplier management or supply chain management frameworks and processes, it is primarily documented. It is a document that people manage, and because there isn't any cross-functional support for all of those processes, it almost seems like there is nothing that is done methodically. The other big challenge is supplier engagement. It is not enough for one person in the organization to be able to work with suppliers. You need to have the whole of your company to be able to, with the whole of the other side of the wall or a fence, which is the supplier. So supplier engagement needs to be broad and in many cases deep. And the fundamental challenge a lot of organizations face is, this does not and cannot be supported just using very transactional solutions, right? People have procure to pay, there is sourcing, there is ERP, but they may or may not be able to support your overall supplier or building a better supply chain framework well. So that's one of the things that we have observed. And of course, bad consequences are well known, right? Supply chain is a big part of what value add, as well as part of your organization in terms of delivering products and goods and services to customers. So anything that is suboptimal from a supplier performance can actually show up as top line issue for your organization. And we know, and all of you also know, that better supply chain always starts with better suppliers. It isn't, if you think of measuring who's a better supplier, it's these three facets or angles that we come up with, which seem to capture how can suppliers gradually improve and become better suppliers. And it is not necessarily therefore that your existing supply base, could be all in the right-hand side. They may fall somewhere, between the middle to the end in some cases, to the left-hand side, right? Requires a lot of hand-holding and improvement. But the goal of better suppliers is to move them into the right-hand direction using a variety of techniques that we'll cover, and get them to become better suppliers, as many of them as possible. And of course, you always start with your current supply base, right? You already have a supply base that is working with you, able to deliver products, components, and services to your organization. So to understand building a better supply chains, that is the number one place to start. And the first thing you also need to understand is, where do they fall in terms of capability, and even more importantly, performance for your organization, right? All of the performance of a supplier is always with respect to your organization, while the capability is something that is generally that they are able to offer to all of their customers, right? So for you, it is better to understand where do they fall when they are working with you. And so depending upon where they fall and depending upon the type of commodity, you may actually have to have some supplier development needs, either improve existing supply base or bringing on new suppliers into your supply base. And when we look at new suppliers, beyond the existing supply base, there are lots of reasons why you'd want to bring in new suppliers, especially in this current environment. it is quite possible that many of the organizations locally here are developing a local supply base that hasn't been there in the past, right? So just to have the resiliency and flexibility, and of course, reducing lead times, etc. So you are probably right now looking quite a bit about bringing on new supply base within the local regions that you operate. In all of these cases, it is important to understand their capability and their capability to serve you as a customer. And that's something that will, although they are new suppliers, that is a good indication of how well they can do, serving you as an organization. Of course, the next thing you will also find is, you still have a lot of existing supply base, a lot of new potential suppliers, as well as needs, coming from new product introductions and new machinery, new needs that are coming across the organization, right? In all of these cases, you still need to be able to conduct proper sourcing evaluations if you have some specific needs that you're bringing in, either existing supplier or new suppliers. In this case, we do believe that in the current environment, you need to expand how to evaluate a good supplier for a specific need beyond just cost and some simple metrics. There are quite a few multifaceted approaches that you need to adopt, and we'll cover some of those. And if you do decide upon bringing on a new supplier or selecting an existing supplier for some new need, what we still see is a very strong need for supplier development. When we talk about supplier development, there is a lot involved in it, or there could be very little depending upon the type of need. Typically, the top here, supply-based development, this applies for every supplier that you're bringing in on board, right? So that they are fully aware and ready to serve you as an organization. On the other hand, if there are some suppliers, you might bring them for a very specific need that requires individual supplier level handholding. That may include, in some cases, even investments that you do, supplier quality engineering. Your organization is actually very heavily involved in bringing them up to speed on the quality processes and the expectations. And also, if there is an improvement possibility that you can collaboratively work on, right? So this is almost you're joining their team or they're joining your team at an individual supplier level that you need to be able to support. And of course, supplier quality engineering plays a very big role in supplier development process. Depending upon the industry, you can pick and choose lots of different tools. What we do see is that you need to be able to make these a fairly routine as well as day-to-day workflows between you and your supply chain. Okay, and then that brings to the challenge of how do we work with suppliers on a day-to-day basis, right? And what we have seen generally is because due to primarily lack of support, that the engagement with suppliers primarily rests with one person within the organization, or maybe perhaps like a few team members, primarily from the purchasing organization. When in fact, when you look at all of the cross-functional work that happens with suppliers, what you really need is anyone within your organization, appropriate people for the task, to be able to work with suppliers. This is something that it's a very big challenge across the board. We've worked with suppliers where our customers, finding some innovative ways to make this day-to-day collaboration a lot easier between the organization and your supply chain. And the final need is also pretty important. Once you have suppliers working with you, supporting your production processes and providing goods and services on a routine basis, on a day-to-day basis, the important thing that you need to be able to support is also give them periodic reporting as well as periodic assessments. When we think of reporting, primarily reporting is very quantitative, right? Based upon certain metrics you all agree on, and those are shared like on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis to them. Very quantitative, and you can use any of the supply chain metrics to provide that feedback to suppliers. Hey, this is how you're measuring up. On the other hand, we also highly recommend the concept of assessment. We'll see an example today. An assessment is more of a cross-functional look at how a supplier is doing, with your, or how a supplier is working with your organization. That will actually, get feedback internally within your organization that interact with the suppliers on various facets, and ask them, how do they rate the suppliers, and using that information provide a performance assessment to the suppliers. And both are these, performance reporting and performance assessment, are very important for a supplier to understand, where they fit, how are they doing, and importantly, improvement opportunities. Where should they focus from an improvement perspective? Okay, so these are some of the fundamentals of how we see, really improving the process of working with your supply chain and making them better. Okay, what I want to do is stop here and actually show you a demo of some of the techniques that we have developed. And I kind of broke it down into 5 parts so that it's easy to navigate as well as understand the life cycle. And what we are going to do is we're going to use our workflow engine. This is an workflow engine that all of our customers use for a variety of supply chain oriented processes. We've developed all of that on that workflow engine. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, if you can think of. It has a workflow engine. It is supply chain, so it is a way to interoperate with your suppliers very easily. It is quite cross-functional, so anybody that is relevant and needs to be involved in the workflow can be involved in the workflow. Typical types of workflows that are deployed include any of these. It includes also certain techniques and analysis approaches, but by and large, very, very focused on supply chain. And one of the things that we've observed is really need to make it easy for your suppliers, right? It cannot be a very elaborate approach and process. So if you think the suppliers need to be able to work with you on a particular scenario, they should be able to join in and participate in that. So you'll see some of that scenarios today based upon these workflow designs that our customers develop themselves. Okay, some of the cross-functional. The other thing that I do want to highlight here is for any of these types of scenarios to work, it is supremely important to be able to interoperate with other systems within your organization, right? Like the ERP solutions, the supply chain planning solutions, or sourcing and procurement, finance, all of that. It is super important. So we've also made it, and you'll see scenarios like that today. So with that, let's look at the demonstration. So I have 2 web browsers. One is in dark to the left. The other one is to the right, which is plain gray. The one here to the right that you're seeing is what you as an organization see. the one to the left, and I will log in as part of a workflow so that you will see what a supplier can and will see, right? And these are, depending upon the type of setup, you can just use single sign-on solutions, but this would be the supplier view of the of the process. Okay, so as you can see, there are several workflows. One of the things that is very common, the way people work with Zflow, is that they'll design a workflow on how they want to structure the process between the organization and with the supply chain. And it can span from the beginning, like, we need to bring in new suppliers, all the way to post production supplier performance assessments, right? Performance reviews, performance assessments, and even voice of suppliers. So just to get how suppliers feel about your organization. So the whole life cycle of a supplier can be structured using a variety of different workflows. In addition to that, you might also have some existing workflows, whether it is requisitions to purchase orders that require fairly intensive work. We'll look at that example today, one of those that may need to be extended to suppliers all the time, right? This is your day-to-day work that you do with your suppliers, and you want to make suppliers a part of this workflow as naturally as possible, and we'll see how that happens. And several more around supplier quality, supplier improvement. It also can be extended into engineering aspects as well. Because a lot of the needs for NPI sourcing do come from product engineering and component engineering. And you need, as an organization, as a supply chain organization, as an engineering organization, you need to be able to work together pretty well, extend each other's processes into to the supply chain. Okay, so if we look at our existing supply base, we can look at where they are. So we have our three main at the points of view for suppliers. One is, what is the relationship status? What is the supplier capability? And what is the supplier performance, right? Performance is based upon the current work that is actually being done with the supplier. Capability is a little bit more general. It can be used throughout the supplier lifecycle. It's primarily used in the beginning. And the relationship status that the suppliers have arrived at in terms of ability to work with you as an organization, and some rules and business, I'd say, agreements based upon this relationship status. Okay, so that's where our existing supply base is. So if you look a little bit more deeply, so these are all the suppliers that we have, different types, right? From manufacturers to parts manufacturer, contract manufacturer, service provider, distributors. All of them have different capabilities, as well as your needs are different with respect to a customer. So in the case of Intel, for example, we find them to be very strategic. The relationship, because it's a current relationship, where they are providing this part to us as a production part, is quite good. All of this is based upon some analysis assessments that are already happened. Okay, and if you look at the profile, this is also something that a lot of customers, a lot of our customers kind of maintain and use to really arrive at some capability scores, etc., right? Which is to understand, what type of certifications that they have, what's their capability, if there's audit has been finished, things of that, like that, right? Purchasing parts that they're qualified to provide or selling right now in the different plants. What is the status of different plants in terms of their capacity to support you as an organization, so on. Okay, so a rich set of information with respect to the supplier flows into the supplier assessment, capability assessment. Now, supplier capability, especially if you are planning on bringing new suppliers. As I told you, a lot of our customers describe these or design these as specific workflows, which also related to each other. So let's assume you're trying to bring in a new supplier. So everything in zFlow is cross-functional, which means all of the different people that are involved in that, playing different roles, come together and work on it. And the way they work is primarily based upon what we call this workflow approach, which is, we follow this procedure to bring on new suppliers, for example. And part of that, if you look at it, purchasing review, supplier risk analysis, different people are doing that as part of, the new supplier onboarding, evaluating new suppliers and bringing them on board. Right, so supply planning, all of this can be done either using different people. These different actors come in together and perform those activities, as well as any type of systems integration that they need. Because once all of this is set up, you might want to just actually create a vendor in SAP, right? So that is also part of the workflow and how you interoperate with other systems. And as part of that workflow activity, we've seen purchasing reviews and supplier risk assessments, right? What you might do is actually a supplier capability assessment. So if you look at we are onboarding Intel or Broadcom, and part of that is, we need to do a capability assessment, right? And for us, the capability assessment, for that particular need, which is, it is again, non-strategic need, the commodity is processors, we want to use this assessment criteria. So under cost, it's initial cost 50%, cost reduction capacity is 50%, quality is primarily incoming quality, car, and service levels are lead times and minimum order quantity, right? So this is an initial capability assessment. Using that, and after collecting some of the information from the suppliers as well as internally of different people, like for example, we might have director of supply chain and component engineers providing feedback into, hey, how is Broadcom likely to do this based upon the information that they've provided, right? You can arrive at a capability assessment score. This is where they fall, right? Based upon the weightage, and and then you can make an informed decision of whether Broadcom is the best organization to support the specific need around processors, right? So that's how you can arrive at who would be the right person, right? Or if your new supplier is coming, to understand their capability to support you as an organization. The other need that we have seen is, you may actually have a need, especially it happens in NPI, that we need to really evaluate some existing suppliers, or perhaps even a new supplier, how they are likely to do. That can be done using RFP, RFQs, and how suppliers respond to it. But once you work through those RFQs, you might want to really do an evaluation of who are the people that responded to that, and where do they fall from an overall performance perspective, right? So this is again, as you are bringing in new suppliers or selecting particular suppliers for some specific needs, you can actually use all of these different techniques to kind of quantify, how likely is a supplier going to do the type of work that you're expecting them to do. Okay, so this is in the beginning stages. So as you are doing this, once you do select a supplier, your work doesn't end. There is still a lot of, in terms of readiness, work that needs to happen, right? Two workflows that we have seen used fairly well is doing supplier audits. Okay, so if you look at supplier audits, for example, in the case of different audits, they can be very different types of audits, right? Depending upon where the stage is. In the beginning, you might ask for self-assessments of the supplier. In the middle, you might actually visit the supplier, and actually your organization does those audits, right? Again, you can have different types of audits to do it, but what it does is provides you with, what is the score, right? In terms of readiness to serve you as an organization. So they are different techniques that you can use to build up, either a capability matrix or a readiness score, and then really depending upon how they're doing, you might actually want to do some follow-on actions. So here, the audit actually created a corrective action for Intel so that they can actually go ahead and do some work. So at this point, what I'll do is log in as the supplier, because we have started to now engage with the supplier. I'm going to, if you notice here, Intel as, this is the supplier. We've actually added few users as Intel participants in the workflow. So when we add these Intel users as part, related to Intel as these are supplier participants, they can be part of any workflows that you make them part of. Okay, so you've added Intel and you said Intel can access any of these different workflows. That means when they log in here, they get their own launch pads and access to all the different areas which you allowed them to participate in these different activities. The other thing is, if they have any work that they need to do, it shows up as, hey, this is, you need to change the PO, you need to respond to this PO, you need to change the profile information, you need to acknowledge this performance report, and so on. So they'll start to get notifications and get pulled into all of the different workflows which are relevant for them. Okay, so in this case, if you look at the audit that we've created for them, they'll look at this. Hey, yes, this is for me. I need to respond to this audit, and this is a very initial audit, right? So they can answer it and complete the response. It can be for suppliers. This is a very natural way of participating in these workflows. They also have a little bit of access to, what is that we are doing, and you can control very easily, one of the different steps that they have to do. Okay. Similarly, there are lots of other workflows in which they can participate and provide, be an actor and play a role in the workflow, do certain things. So in this case, we have seen the supplier corrective action, right? We have created a supplier corrective action and we've actually assigned it to them. So they have to now finish up all of the corrective action related work, because that's assigned to now Intel to do it, because it is considered a supplier corrective action. So as and when they get added to workflows, they will see these notifications, and they can pick any of the areas, and it'll directly put them to the action page that they need to do, integrate, right? So now we also look at other scenarios around industry specific readiness checks or workflows. One such example here that I have is, supplier PPAP, right? Production part approval process, which is what PPAP expands to, is a very, very effective way of ensuring that the supplier is engaged, part of the product development and production process. And it provides a very methodical approach to ensuring that they are ready to produce parts in volume, right? Once all of these checklist items are approved by you, right? Depending upon the level of PPAP, what we call production levels, these might vary. And importantly, you and suppliers, have to go through this different phase gate approach of readiness, right? If you're in automotive, aerospace, or even high tech lately in medical devices, this is almost a required approach to ensure that the suppliers are actually able to provide this part in volume at the desired quality levels, right? So you can use this more industry specific as well as rigorous approaches to also ensure that the suppliers are ready. Of course, once they're ready, they're now able to ship products. The need for day-to-day collaboration becomes very important at this point. One of the things that we have seen a very, very dire need, strong need these days is for purchase order collaboration. Right? There's even though purchase orders are issued, there continues to be quite a bit of uncertainty around pricing, delivery schedules, etc., which suppliers need to be able to come back and respond to. Actually, those changes seem to be happening on both sides, which is the customers change it as well as the suppliers changing it. So here is an example of a workflow. Once the purchase order is released in the system, it automatically adds the relevant supplier into the workflow and releases this PO. So they have the capability to change it. So if you look at this workflow, once the PO is released, suppliers can decide to either confirm the PO or PO changes. The PO changes, if I am a supplier here, actually it is right now with Intel. Right? So you can go ahead and provide these changes. Hey, do I want to change a new quantity? Do I want to suggest any new net price for each of the items in the PO? And do I want to adjust any PO item schedules? Right? So all of those are changes that seem to be happening quite a bit around both raw materials and your contract manufacturing and third-party manufacturing suppliers. So these types of very easy way to collaborate with your suppliers on a day-to-day workflows processes is also very, very important to kind of provide that engagement between you and the suppliers. Not only that, this actually gives you the capability to respond to changes very quickly, as well as decide upon ourselves, what is the best course of action if some of the things are changing, especially delivery dates or delivery schedules, right? Because you, as an organization internally, have to react to any of these changes on how do you adjust. Okay. So now that your suppliers are able to work with you on a day-to-day basis, and after certain work is finished, you can start to provide them with periodic what we call supplier performance reports. So a way for suppliers to come in and understand, hey, how are they doing? And this is our most recent periods, where do they fall with previous periods? These can be based upon some of the metrics that you decide are relevant for. So in the case of quality, cost, both material and logistics costs are important. Quality is primarily PPM, service level. So you can decide what makes sense from a supplier performance report perspective. They'll get that periodic reports, and even more important is just as important, I would rather say, is performance assessments, or we would call performance reviews. This is something that is has become a little bit important as well as very effective compared to just reporting. The performance review is something where you are actually able to provide you with very specific report on how a supplier is doing based upon the inputs from your own internal organization. It's based upon certain ratings, and we have these performance frameworks, right, that you can use depending upon what the needs are. For example, for commodities, these are the only 5 areas, performance areas, right? Then we look at what are the different facets, what that go into those areas, and based upon those responses internally that you get, you can actually create a performance assessment and provide that to your suppliers so that they know where the improvements can be. Okay. There's also another way to look at that. This is a performance area, and something that we have seen in capability assessments, right? So you're measuring against the same levels that you've shared. That's how we give it. And how do they actually perform, right? Based upon the work that they're doing with you. So this is something that you can actually share with your suppliers. One of the things that is important to understand here is this is the type of thing which requires your internal organization to be able to provide input about the supplier and how they're able to engage with you and support you as a customer. That means you'll have to send it out, they'll provide you inputs. So it's a survey type of scenario. We have all of that workflow set up here. It's pretty easy, but this is something that you can do maybe once a quarter at the lowest level. Ideally, it should be once every 6 months or maybe once a year, depending upon the type of customer, supplier, and need. Okay, it's a little bit heavy, but it is way more important to give this feedback to your suppliers so that they can actually discuss and internally understand where they stand and put in some improvement plans in place, okay, that they both of you agree on. So overall, we've seen a lot of our customers use a variety of these workflows and techniques to really strengthen their supply base and improve the supply base, as well as continuously provide them with feedback and improvement programs that they can run. Okay. Key thing that we've found is that you need to be able to, anything when you're dealing with suppliers, especially that crosses production, direct materials, NPI, you need to be able to integrate with your core ERP, sourcing, and even engineering systems really easily. That's something that we have enabled here so that you can get the vendors or understand the parts, the supply chain relationships, all of that really, really well. It is this system is connected directly to those different backend ERP or PLM engineering systems, or even sometimes CRM systems. What it allows us to easily get is all of the information that is relevant and interoperate with them very easily as part of the workflows. So here in this case, we are able to get the POs, update the POs, create POs, get the vendors, get materials, all of that, so that you don't have to really think of, hey, all of this workflow is flowing seamlessly between your internal systems, your teams across the board, and with your suppliers. And it can be fairly effective and powerful when all of this flows together. Okay, so when you look at that, we pretty much have a good sense of what is our product supply chains, etc. Right? So if you look at this product that you're making, we know what the parts are, what the materials are, who the suppliers are, what's the current agreement with the suppliers. All of that is already in place when you connect the information and the supply chain to this workflow engine. Okay. So with that, what I will do is pause and let you ask any questions. Okay. Yeah, how are the notifications to suppliers going? Yeah, suppliers, when they are part of these workflows, they automatically get these notifications to these activities that they need to perform. So for example, supplier PO changes, like a notification goes to email. So I'll show you an example email here. And so something like this goes to the supplier saying, you're expected to do some work. Please go ahead, click here and go and do it. And when they log in here, it puts them directly to the exact place where they need to do some work here. Okay. And, you can give them instructions. And generally, we have seen suppliers, we do conduct training sessions. It is not necessary that you deploy all of these in one shot. Most of the time, people pick and choose which ones are the most relevant and start with those as the workflows to work with the suppliers. There's another question of, is there a receiving function? The PO process can include some receiving steps involved here. There is a lot of times our customers, when they are collaborating on POs between them and suppliers, they do include, ASNs and etc. But the receiving is actually being conducted by ERP in most cases. Most of our customers have either SAP or Oracle or Dynamics or NetSuite. The actual process of receiving, once POs are updated, suppliers PO confirmed, there are additional steps around receiving and and goods receipt verifications, informing the suppliers of GR status, etc. for each of those PO lines received. So that's can be made accessible, but the receiving function is actually conducted by the core ERP. Okay, because they have the PO open when they receive it, a warehouse or some other place, and then put the PO against the receipt. Now there are scenarios, purchase requisitions, etc., where receiving happens either, if it is a service, etc., where you can include the receipt process in this one. Let me show you the Okay, so here, within those steps, asset commissioning between requesters and asset commissioning, there is actually a receipt that is done as part of the workflow. Okay, I think it may actually be in the customer purchase requisitions. Okay, yeah, so you can include that, provided It is not what we would consider to be a production part or things that are received in warehouses and other places. Okay, there is another question. Do suppliers need to subscribe to this, or only the customer needs subscription? Only the customers need subscription. We also, because it is a workflow engine, we have made it fairly flexible in terms of how you buy this. We don't keep track of the number of suppliers. You can have 10 suppliers or 1,000 suppliers. It doesn't matter. What is more important is the amount of what you would call usage that you will see, because it's a lot of it is dependent upon the number of workflows that are going through the through this engine. Okay, so if you, let's say, one way to determine is how much work is going on. So there are 274 workflows, from PRs to supplier performance reviews to purchase order collaboration. There's another question: is this available in other countries? Yes, you can deploy this for suppliers in other countries. We have instances where suppliers are logging from Far East, in Europe and other places. And it does come in multiple languages. For suppliers, it comes in their local language. So when suppliers come in, usually it automatically selects the language based upon your locale, but there are different languages that can be enabled. Okay. Another question. Another question that we normally get is, this is something that is available for you on Amazon Web Services and Azure, depending upon what is, you can run it on your own. One of the things that, because of the type of work that we do with our customers, they tend to have quite a bit of data protection security rules. So they themselves run this on their, what they call Azure or AWS, Amazon Web Services accounts. So it gives quite a bit of flexibility and control over how much, what do you want to do with it in terms of integration as well as workflows. All of these workflows are, you can use what we provide. And some of them we do recommend that you use the framework that we provide, right? Especially around supplier performance, RFP, RFQs, sourcing evaluations, because it's a fairly well thought out frameworks. The others, you can design your own workflows. A lot of our customers have their own corrective action process, their non-conformances, supplier non-conformances that they've already have documented and published with suppliers. In such a scenario, you want to exactly follow what you currently have in place as a documented procedure. And it is important for many reasons to follow exactly what you already have. So you can actually design that specifically for the way you want to handle this. Okay, so if you look at a little bit more elaborate one, so there is a custom corrective action. If you look at this, it follows a much more elaborate process, right? So this is something that people can design. Your team can design and set it up as the way you'd want to work within your organization and with the supply chain. And it doesn't require it is done typically our customers with the business teams, they themselves do this. Okay. And in terms of, there's another question on integration. So the system itself, we provide all of the integration capabilities to other relevant systems that you may have. It's not something that you need to worry about. You also don't need any other middleware or integration frameworks. There is a fairly well-developed integration framework within the workflow engine that you can use as it is, or improve upon it. But this is something that we take it as our responsibility, so that you don't have to kind of spend time and money on this integration requirements. Yeah. Any other questions? So we have 3 more minutes. So while you're still thinking of any questions, we do want to give you the option of potentially, if this is something that can be useful for your organization, that you can actually test drive it. We will set it up, and you can use it to see if it be useful and valuable to improve your supply chain. And a couple of other options, proof of concept and free pilots, are slightly a little bit different, because some of our customers or prospective customers come with very specific scenarios that they want to see if it can support. Might require a little bit of design, but that is something that we also support. If you have some unique needs and processes that are non-standard and you're not able to support them effectively with any existing approaches, it's something that we can design and show you this is how it'll work, and you can test it out as something very specific to your organization. Those are the 2 proof of concept and free pilots are for that. Test drive is primarily around whatever is their standard that you can use. But if you would like to do that, please send us an email, and then we can set it up and engage with you so that you can test it out. Okay. If we have no other questions, I'll leave the session with a few pointers. Please send us an email if you are interested in a test drive. Second is, we will, once the recording is available, send the recording and the PowerPoint to you, so that you can review or look at other areas of the session. Feel free to share with others that maybe find it useful. And finally, I want to take this opportunity to thank you. You've set aside almost an hour for this session, and we appreciate you taking time off of your very busy schedules. With that, I will close the session. Again, thank you very much for joining the session. Please feel free to write us an email if you have any questions or would like to try. And you should see the recording and the PowerPoint presentation hopefully by tomorrow afternoon. Thank you. Thanks for the time.